Hi, welcome everybody today to UX Live with Adobe. I'm Samantha Warren. Today's my first day hosting. I'm really excited to be here. We're here today with Nick and Ian. They were here yesterday. We're part of an entire series of us bringing in UX designers using XD to show different processes that people use in order to make the things that they make every day. And you all come to the table with a really unique set of experiences. We're really excited to talk about game design today.
Yeah. Perfect.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're just kind of continuing on our development of our pretend game Gobstoppers from yesterday. I guess we can kind of run through what we did yesterday.
And before we jump in, can you give us
Sure.
a little bit of background on what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So right now, Nick and I are running a UI UX studio called Beholder, and we basically do consulting for other gaming studios on various projects. So our day-to-day generally is interfacing with clients and building content for whatever projects they have us working on. And so, yeah, it's typical deliverables. So we're building wireframes, building PSD art assets, delivering cut-up assets that are engine ready, yeah, that's generally what we're doing.
And so your clients are game companies.
Yeah.
How did you get into that? That's so exciting.
Well, we worked at a bunch of game companies first, and decided to kind of go out on our own. But I mean, if you want to rewind the clock back into just how we got into doing this for games in general, I mean, I've always been an avid video game player. Like the first time I played like an Intellivision or ColecoVision or whatever, that's what I wanted to do forever. I'm sure Nick has similar experience.
Yep.
But yeah, so I started teaching myself how to do digital art and stuff. And I think I probably started working on like Corel Painter or something like way back in the day, and using what were those tools? Totally blanking on what it was. They were all like physical brushes and stuff. There was like old filters for Photoshop, MetaTools, Kai's Power Tools.
Oh, Kai's Power, yeah. Yeah, I was trying to get I had to jog my own memory.
Really old stuff. Yeah, so I started doing that and started getting into like the mod scene around like Doom and Doom 2 and doing level building and stuff like that. So it was kind of just dabbling in everything because there was no college to go to and get a gaming design degree or anything, so you were just on your own. There was not even YouTube, so like you're completely on your own if you wanted to figure this stuff out. So yeah, it was just about playing around with the tools and seeing how other developers built stuff and just learning those things by practicing and failing a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, so it's interesting because I think we've talked to other UX designers who design apps. You hear so much about designing apps and websites, but really you don't hear a lot about the UX of game design.
Yeah,
I think, and I think that's a really interesting perspective, really, that you bring to the table.
It's kind of interesting. There's not as many of us out there as there are website and app developers, but we're definitely out there. And we're at every game studio. There's usually someone at least doing UI, and if not, sometimes breaking up into people who do UI UX at game companies. So we definitely exist.
Well, let's dig in. I'm excited to see what you worked on yesterday.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
you can go first.
Yeah. So I kind of just jumped in here and just built like a real rough little flow chart just to kind of determine how these screens are going to flow together. And yeah, granted, XD is not the best flowchart tool. There are faster tools to build this in, but it's nice to just have as a reference in XD to just be able to quickly do this. Granted, you could just go into Visio or something and save out a JPEG and drop it.
But like
in
having
here
it right
too,
there
but
on your canvas.
just having
nice.
it here is just nice because then it's like, oh, where's it supposed to go again? Especially when you're prototyping too, it's just nice to have a reference. And then yeah, so I mean, splash screen, and then there's two main menus, and then we did options and load screens and a loading screen. So this is basically the original splash screen that got updated with Nick's logo. So Nick built a logo, and then I ended up dropping it into here just as it's black and white, so it's a placeholder. And then this one is basically the version of when you hit a key to start the game. If you don't have any save games already, you can only create a new game, so there's no save games. And this is the same thing, but you've already got a game in progress. You could also create a new game or load a different game if you wanted to. And then this was just our little loading screen, and I just went in and traced the little candy in XD just to make a little vector graphic out of it, and just use that as like a little throbber, or a spinner as it's more commonly referred to. And then I just did, zoomed in too far, I do that all the time. I created little option screens, you could do difficulty selection and that sort of thing. And then a little load game screen, so you can pick your save game and go from there. Although I did forget to put a delete button in there, so I should do that.
And I think it's also good to give context to people tuning in today who haven't tuned in yesterday. We're basically developing a fake game that we made up before we came in called Gobstoppers. It's a game with little kids who run around during trick-or-treating, and there's these monsters called the Gob who basically steal candy and they have to get candy back. It's not the most ingenious game, and the title alone shows you how ingenious the whole concept is. But
this is our little brief. This is normally we would get a brief like this from our client, and then we would work from this. Or if we were working in a game studio with other game designers or whatever, we would meet on these topics and have discussions about what the game design is and how these things work and what's the overall concept. So.
And do you generally jump right into mocking something up, or do you sometimes sketch?
So we want to look. Well, we can go over our process again briefly. So generally from here, this is like an ingest point. So we're getting information from a client or from a game designer or what have you, and then we're determining kind of what the stylistic vibe is we want to go for. So we tend to, as we mentioned yesterday, we tend to go through a process called funneling. So we do art funneling, we do design funneling. So generally we start with like a mood board, and we might also start with some like rough mock-ups and wireframes to try and get a feel for the direction that the developer wants to go in. And so like we had some reference art yesterday that we kind of went through. This is just like a general like mood board, so there's like a bunch of images in here. Can open this real quick.
And so like when you're making a mood board, you're just throwing a bunch of different ideas into a folder.
Yeah, so it's like so these are like the kind of like you can kind of see like Nick's logo kind of went off of this kind of vibe, especially the Venture Brothers logo in here. Like we really like this logo.
Yeah.
So you can see it kind of has like that vibe to it.
Kind of backlit vibe. Yeah.
And we're doing knockouts in the letters and stuff.
Yeah. Same sort of thing.
So yeah, we're kind of like doing pulpy, like Saturday morning cartoons type of stuff, and it's like action RPG kind of vibe to it, and so that's kind of, I guess, did I fully describe the funneling process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty good. And typically what we're doing is we're doing like a vertical slice of like kind of a lot of the things that the clients would usually hire us to do. Sometimes they hire us to do creative direction, sometimes they hire us to do the logo. A lot of the times, obviously, they hire us to do the UI and the UX for the game that they're working on. It's our core competency, but we also have quite a bit of experience funneling a creative direction for a project. So I said this last time, it's good to reiterate that a lot of the times these games are in early development. An art director has usually concept drawings or sketches of where they know where the game is going to go. Sometimes they have really rudimentary 3D assets in the game, let these be environments or characters or creatures or monsters. And they'll give us all that stuff. They'll be like, here's screenshots, here's assets, here's stuff. How do we make the UI and everything that overlays on top of it feel like it's cut from the same cloth and part of the same universe? So that's usually a really big component to like why people even hire us in the first place, because we know how to take something that's currently existing and something that they have a direction and they know where it is, and then we can kind of build off of that and kind of marry those two together.
You're extending a design system, but in a very different kind of way.
Yeah, very different way, because games are large. We're talking about, like, when someone says they have a 100-person game team, that's a moderate. It's a moderate trip.
These days, that is very moderate.
It's a moderate game team size. I mean, like it, and usually by the end of development, they'll build up to 150 people, or sometimes even more. And then you get your games like Call of Duties and stuff like that. You can have your Assassin's Creeds, your Call of Duties. Those games can have multiple studios all over the world, hundreds upon hundreds of people working on them, and over the course of many years, getting something together. So we're one facet in a larger kind of system, but it has to feel like it's all part of the same system when it's delivered as a game to the player.
Excellent.
If you want, I can go over kind of simply what I did yesterday and kind of bring people up to speed. In our example, I described we're actually doing a logo for it, and we're doing look and feel, and we're doing creative direction. So I started with the splash screen. And I first started with the logo. So this getting to the silhouette next. The logo, obviously, the things that we were showing. For Saturday morning cartoons, Ghostbusters, silhouette-y. We're gonna be applying colors next, and we're gonna be picking that color palette. And pretty much when we're done with this start screen, we're gonna have a vibe, and we're gonna build the rest of the screens and the rest of the art direction off that vibe. So we kind of got to a good stopping point yesterday, where we got the logo done. That's looking pretty cool. I handed that back to Ian so he could put it in the wires, and then I started building out the start screen kind of below here, where I put like a little house and some trees and kind of sometimes start screens can just more with color give a vibe. I mean, if we really wanted to, we could put bats, or we could put silhouettes of kids running. That's another option of like trick-or-treating and things like that. But basically, I just wanted to do a simple setting. And another thing that I really wanted to do was establish that I know this is going to be our start screen. So basically, the screen when you load up a game is the start screen. It's just like it brings you into the world, it kind of introduces you to the game, gives you the logo. I wanted to visually create a gut right here. So that's why I have this larger tree here and this house here, so that it kind of visually just houses the logo on the start screen. And I think as we start adding colors and functionality, you kind of see where that's going.
And are you drawing this all freehand?
Yeah, this stuff I drew yesterday all in Animate.
Okay.
So, and I went through a thing yesterday where I talked about I preferred Animate as a vector drawing program over Illustrator because of there's personal preferences, but also it's really fast for me to go in and cut up shapes and move things around, and it's just a preference of mine. So typically I'll open up Animate before I open up Illustrator to start drawing vectors.
Yeah, and I've actually watched Nick do that a bunch, and if you got a chance to see him do it yesterday, you can see how quickly he can rough in shapes and extract clean vector graphics out of there. I still need to practice at it because I'm really bad at it, but I still build all my vectors in Photoshop just using the shape tools.
It sounds like speed is a really important part of your process.
For sure.
Are you under a lot of deadlines?
Yeah, I mean, that's all we're always looking at deadlines all the time.
Yep.
So there's always, even on a game team where you have much longer deadline or much longer lead times for work, you still have deadlines that you need to hit, shipping dates, like those are always there. Obviously, games slip all the time. That happens, but you want to kind of come to conclusions on designs and kind of button things up as you go, so that you can kind of because you're always kind of you're marching in tandem with other groups that are relying on you finishing your work within a certain time, or it's stacked, right? Like they can't start on something until you're done with your thing. So like for art, like Nick can't start building art for a screen if there's no design.
So folks have asked for your social media accounts. You guys are on social media?
Yeah.
Where can we find you?
On in there, there's actually a link in chat, twitter.com/beholderdesign.
Yeah.
That's our company.
Bridget put it in there.
My personal Twitter account is Poopy Socks.
Is there a story there?
You know what? I made it when I was 13, and damned if I'm going to change it. Sounds like a good idea when I was 13. It still sounds like a great one.
Sometimes we make those professional decisions at the wrong time.
He's professionally poopy socks, everybody.
In fact, that was one of the questions when Adobe first called me, was like, so, your Twitter handle. And I'm like, ain't changing it. No, just joking. No, they're very inquisitive about the same thing. Like, where did that come from? And I'm just like, well, 13-year-old me there's still, 13-year-old me kind of hanging
I was going to tweet it earlier, and I was like, maybe I have
like,
the wrong person.
Is this correct? Yeah. When I saw the first Adobe interview go up, I was like, really, dude? You use that Twitter handle? Come on. Dude.
So let's go ahead and dive in a little bit more. I'm interested in learning about where you're planning on heading today.
Sure. Okay.
And in case anybody's wondering, I'm Pixhell, Hell, on Twitter.
Pixhell.
Yeah. Because I'm clever or something. It's not. Yeah, so yesterday I also kind of just showed this. This was just a little layout I did for the console buttons, so I can copy and paste those into my other document, which is over here. So yeah, today we are Nick's going to be finishing up the splash screen with some color and stuff in Photoshop. And then we might dump that into XD just to see how it looks up here. And let's see. I do need to add the delete button in there because that's part of that flow. And then we're going to work on some character creation screens. So typically, that's a kind of core thing, typical thing in RPGs. You start a new game and you create a new character. And so that usually has what do you want your character to look like? What kind of hair do they have? That sort of thing. What kind of costume do they start in? That sort of thing. So we're going to kind of wire that out. And Nick probably will take an asset that's a mock asset that we would get from a client and clean it up and prep it for going into design. And then I'll take that and incorporate that into my character creation flow. And if we have time, we might start on heads-up display UI as well. And then we'll continue that tomorrow.
Yeah. So, did you want to kind of start into what you're doing? I'm going to kind of prep and export this to get it ready for Photoshop. So
this screen not having a delete button on it is bothering me. I need to fix it.
Okay.
I need to go steal this guy.
So when you're working on game screens like this, is there a certain size that you work at, or an aspect ratio that tends to be standard?
Yeah, so I'm designing in the web template right now, which is 1920, and I typically just design in that size. And you'll actually see when I have to click on this line. You'll see when Nick starts messing with stuff in art, he'll shrink my work or move it around or chop it up. One of the nice things about working in UX and games is when it comes to the wireframing aspect of it, it's a lot looser than, say, working on an Apple iOS device because there's relatively strict guidelines in terms of how far apart buttons are, because you're having to worry about a finger and not a mouse cursor, or there is no mouse cursor because in this case you're using console controls, so there's no cursor at all, and there's nothing blocking the screen, so you can use the full field. Granted, there are limitations in terms of resolution and televisions, because you have cropping and safe zones on televisions, although newer televisions do a lot better at that too now. So it's getting a lot easier in terms of not having to worry as much about resolution and things like that. And especially in the wires, the wires usually are roughly translated into the art, and they're not necessarily always one-to-one, because the creative side of it will skew things a lot of times. Sometimes things Nick talked about this yesterday too. I don't know if you want to elaborate on it again, but sometimes things just won't translate well from wires to art. It'll feel clunky, or it just doesn't look right, or it doesn't mesh well with a newer art direction or some other art element that we introduced somewhere. And so there's always adjustments, and the wireframes are a guideline and not necessarily canon, because they're always open to change when it's flowing into the creative stuff, because we always want to make stuff look nice and not just slavishly follow whatever the wires say.
And when you're setting up something like this, do you follow any sort of grid system, or is it fairly
sometimes free flow? It's generally pretty free flow. Grids can help for sure. I generally just follow rules of thirds and try to break things up that way. And we like to have like big splashy key art in places and stuff. So I try to leave room for doing some creative things. Big screenshots or that sort of thing. Granted, like in this case, like squares might be really boring, so we might come in here and just like tweak these a little bit, or give it a little bit of character, and just do that sort of thing. But obviously, these things always get translated differently when they go into art.
How did you decide the typefaces that you're using here?
Oh, so yeah, when we were first kind of talking about the logo, and part of the initial process for developing creative for a client, one of the things we do is font choice as well is really important. And so yeah, like Nick picked out this font, and it's just a chunky font, and we don't really have to do much to it to make it look kind of fun and interesting. And so you can see, and it matches really nice with the logo, because the logo is already in that font. Granted, it's highly stylized by comparison. But this is nice because we can just type this in, and it just works. A lot of games like to use live text because they get translated in tons of different languages, and so it's important to have a font that can be used in a logo, and then also referenced as a reference point to the logo, but then also be live, so it can be translated or changed or be dynamic in some cases. There's a lot of stuff that gets this happens in apps too, where you have things that are like tokened to a name or whatever, a user profile name or something like that. So
are there any specific challenges for choosing a font for an app, like as far as licensing?
Licensing is a concern for sure. Obviously, like we're always gonna when we use a font or suggest a font, it's up to the client to purchase that font. Or in the case where when we were working in Blizzard or at Sony, we would have to go to a producer or whoever and say, hey, we want to buy this font because we want to use it, and then they have to go purchase and do all the licensing for distribution and everything.
Sometimes we'd pick a font, we'd like it, we can't wait for the approval process, especially at a company like Blizzard. You have to make sure that font is usable, and also a company that's the size of Blizzard, they make games internationally, so you have to make sure that the fonts actually localize. There's an option for Cyrillic, there's an option for Asian language fonts, so you have to make sure that you have all those, and sometimes when it gets through the whole process, you can't get access to the font, or there's like some legal issue why that font can't be cleared. Sometimes you have to go back and find one that almost matches it identically, and swap it out for something that can be legally kind of.
And there's also the concern of like having all the characters, having the full Unicode set of characters, because a lot of free fonts that you might find on the web don't have a full Unicode set. In some cases, they'll, like, either clients or a publisher like Blizzard will go pay a font house to create the rest of that set of that font, and then they'll create a new font basically that has that full Unicode set, so it can be used in translations into kanji and other languages.
Awesome. So I think we should go ahead and take a look at some of the submissions.
Sure.
This week our theme is food for folks who are making XD prototypes. We have a lot of really great submissions that have been coming in. We're going to go ahead and take a look at, I think the first one we're going to look at is morning muffin.
Excuse me.
So it looks like here there's a couple different screens. We're starting out with your muffin selection. Go ahead and click through it. Chocolate chip, red velvet. I think some interesting things that are here, there's an interesting color scheme, but I would, I think there's maybe some accessibility stuff with the white on the yellow. Who was the submission for this? Is this Jeanette? Yeah, I think this is some really good stuff that Jeanette has been working on here. Delivered within an hour, morning muffin, rate, and then a rate us button.
Are those elements clickable?
I think, let's see, morning muffin, there we go.
Yeah,
so here we're getting get the transitions.
Cool.
Yeah, let's actually start from the beginning and there we go. That's a nice transition. I think feels really, can switch. Overall, you guys have any feedback?
The one of the things that I noticed is the yellow bars with the text in it. It's a little bit cramped. So you might consider taking those out and using font sizes or bolding areas of the text that you want to draw attention, or just make that a solid field of color would be another direction to go.
Yeah, I think you got some really contrasting colors. I think the breakup of space is there's a little too many vertical breakups visually. I would try to find ways to lay out the design that you vertically break it up. Also, having a heavy muffin on the right and then have a heavy muffin on the left is like my eyes bouncing from right back to middle back to left. So you're going kind of visually right heavy, then center heavy, then left heavy, which is, I would suggest if you're going to go left align down the page. If you're going to go center align, etc., etc.
Yeah, so some alignment things, but overall a really nice submission. Let's go forward to food book. I'm digging this.
I like that logo. It's pretty cool.
Feels really fun. Let's go ahead and click through. Hungry? Yes, very much. Not very much. No, I just had lunch, so maybe not much. Get 10% off your food if you have no rush. Again, hungry. Huh. I like the way that they've incorporated the shorthand logo.
Yeah, cool.
That's nice up there in the top. Let's see, some nice rollovers. Pick your greens. Some nice transitions. Do you all have some feedback?
Oh, they're putting the logo on things that were selected.
Yeah.
It took me a second to figure that out.
A+ on the logo.
Yeah,
I like the logo. I actually like the color combos. I like the color combos more on the other pages than I do on the inner pages, but I understand why there's white there because it can get busy.
Yeah.
Overall, really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the logo works especially really nice here. It's really fun, funky, and the color combination is really spot on. Makes me feel hungry. And so this is, I guess this is there an accent over the U, food?
Food.
Let's go ahead and go through this one. Log in.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that transition over there from the right to left. I'm always thinking about, which should it be, right to left, left to right, and which part of the app. Let's see. Let's go ahead and dig in here. Rewards card, book a space. Nice. Let's try and do a rewards card. That's a really nice kind of like infographic way of showing some transition there. Let's go back. Look, let's try the map. I like that pop-up. That's really nice how they've done the pop-up there.
Yeah, that's nice. Do they do all of them?
I think it's just prototype for the one as an example.
Lazy.
It takes a lot to make those prototypes.
Yeah. It's a total joke.
Let's keep going through. I think that's all the way through.
Ratings on
the
restaurants and stuff.
Ratings on the
cool.
restaurants are nice. I think overall there's a really nice flow going on here.
Yeah.
What sort of feedback do you have? I think these buttons are a little quiet for having, they have the shadow under them.
Yeah.
rather than having...
I don't know if it's the monitor or the distance I'm at it, but yeah, it's a little hard to see.
Yeah, it's a little hard. I think maybe going in and adding either some definition or color to those buttons, and maybe even make them a little bit more chunky for finger touch.
Yeah.
Great.
That could help for sure.
All right. Well, let's keep moving. Let's dig back in to what you guys are working on. We'll revisit some more of the submissions in a little bit.
Excellent.
Cool. So I'm just starting to set up my Photoshop file and get all my assets into Photoshop. And what I'm going to be doing I'm probably going to be doing some painting and kind of fleshing this out and giving it more of a look and feel and some depth and some mood. Some of the things I'm initially thinking about is like, what am I going to be my contrasting colors? So I'm going to go into like a bluey green sort of ghostly color for the logo and the ground, right? Something that's kind of in that kind of realm. Maybe something that gradients off. I'll play around with those. I'm going to put a nice mix with a nice bluish to magenta kind of color tone in the background for the night sky. That might look really nice. And then I'm going to basically do what's called one level of highlighting in the bottom image, just enough to give it something that's subtle, and then I'm probably going to take Ian's wires here and just put whatever functionality I need to put in the middle, which on the splash screen is the only thing I got to put in there is please press any key. Yeah. Which is not that difficult. This is probably the easiest screen from like what he's doing in his wires to what I'm doing. This is much more illustration heavy, but at least I know, okay, we got a clean logo in the middle, press any key, and that's going to be our start screen. The UX of this is not the significant part of this screen. This is what I like to call like a mood setting screen, right? This is something that like it's a touch point, it's a touchdown.
It's a hero shot.
It's a hero shot.
We call it sometimes.
We call it hero shots. It's basically something that we want to get the mood of this screen right, because we're gonna use that as a jumping pad for some of our other screens to kind of build that look and feel off.
The anchor point.
Yeah, it's the anchor point. So if people have been looking at this stuff so far and been like, oh, this stuff is really not that interesting, I thought they were going to build out UIs, we're now going to be flipping over and getting into like a lot more of the art look and feel, and a lot more of like the inventory screens and the heads-up display that's over the game world. And I think that stuff's going to maybe prompt a lot more questions, or what are you guys doing that's interesting, because it's going to start looking like we're going to start doing the video game screens, and I think that's where it gets. It's
going to start looking a little more like a video game.
Yep. So, and if anyone has questions about kind of from yesterday how I put together the logo, or kind of how I started my thought process, there's obviously you can go back and watch the video from yesterday, or just ask.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm gonna just start laying in colors here. So typically I just export a vector out, and I realized actually my Flash was out of date, so I just updated it. That's probably why it wasn't exporting vectors, but I just pulled it in as a raster. It's totally fine for the demonstration. But typically I'll pump out a vector, bring it in, make it a smart object, or a vector layer, and I'll be using these as my silhouette backing. And now I'm going to be doing all pixel painting on top of this. So this is all raster stuff. I also just as far as workflow goes, there's a lot of conversations, especially around designers, about working non-destructively, and there's complete validity to that. I work very destructively.
Yeah. It takes a lot of patience, right?
It takes.
Nick is an art barbarian.
If this was an RPG game, I'm definitely not the elven archer who comes in and is elegant and Legolas just slides down the stairs. No, I'm the dwarf that you throw over to and starts just hacking away. And I do that not because I've grown used to that. I do that because it's the most efficient way to get me to the result.
Right.
And that's really the ultimate thing I care about. If it took me twice as long to do that, I wouldn't do that. There are things I do make non-destructive, and I abuse and use Photoshop layer styles in a way that is like, I'm talking sometimes I'll layer 7 of them on top, so I can, if I know I need
like
that to be
multiple layers with different values of the same effect stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, I'll do it in groupings, and then I'll do it on the individual layers themselves, to basically stack effects. There's an art to that, right? You don't want to. It's kind of like, they're really powerful tools, but it's sort of like an outer glow can look like a fake outer glow in Photoshop really quickly and not look good. I think we all know, like, we've seen examples of if you just leave things on defaults and don't really know where to like pull and tweak them, they can look pretty awful. They look pretty gnarly. So I'll kind of be showing you some of that stuff, and really honestly, I'm going to probably be doing a little bit of painting here. So I'm going to go into that.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of start laying out like the guts of kind of what will be our character creation screen here. So there's gonna be a bunch of selection boxes in here, and I'm not exactly sure what they're all gonna be just yet. We'll say there's gonna be like 3 or 4. We'll figure out what they're gonna be later. And I'm definitely gonna need space for controls. And we're probably gonna have like a big character in here somewhere. So I'm gonna need space for that too. Just make a little blob man. Just make him a top. Just be a little spinner. There we go. So here's our super low fidelity character placeholder until Nick gets me a character to drop in there. Top man.
Top man.
His name will be Kevin.
Yeah, we've named him Kevin.
This will be like your character name, right? So let's say you start with a default character name.
London just mentioned that your Wacom tablet is almost as old as you are.
It's
What's the year on that?
It is an Intuos 3
Oh my god, dude.
model PTZ 630. Go ahead and look it up. It is old. My keyboard at home is the soft, not quite mechanical Apple keyboard from the first G4 towers. It works.
Yeah. If it works, I mean, that's the most important part of the tools you use.
And
if
I
it works,
like
it
them.
works.
Yep.
And so I see that you're really doing a lot of this freehand. You're not using like any like settings or like you're not really even drawing a gradient. You're creating a gradient yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I want there to be. I don't want it to be perfect.
Yeah.
I want it to have sort of a natural feel and look to it as I kind of go about doing it. And you'll see very quickly if I'll just do a quick clipping mask here. I'm going to begin hitting up my color palette that I want very quickly just by going, okay. And what's interesting is I can kind of do this, and then I can get a color range that I like, and then just make that my flat color.
And you're using kind of a soft brush there. How did you choose that brush for this?
It's default round brush.
It's just the default round brush?
The biggest myth in painting in Photoshop is that if I get your brush set, I'll suddenly be awesome at painting stuff. And I actually, by the way, I had this mentality going in, and all the artists at Blizzard were pretty much like, I've got a couple custom brushes, square brush, default Photoshop square brush with a couple of things tweaked, and a default round brush are what I use for 90% of my work. And that blew my mind.
Yeah.
They're like, I just change opacity and I change flow. That's all I really do when I'm doing painting. And I was like, I was kind of blown away by that. And then I watched them do it, and I'm like, oh, because they're like, it's really, the brush isn't the thing that makes it more efficient. If you're painting clouds and stuff like that, or grass, and they might have tools. You know, they're painting grunge on something.
Yeah.
They have tools for that. I mean, it's way easier to do with a proper brush. But to nail out your silhouettes and your shapes and your colors and you can really rely actually on default brushes a lot.
That's awesome to hear, because I do think like sometimes people think that they need that special brush set, and I think the brush sets do serve.
Oh, they're amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's this isn't to say that like what's there is like the ability to add brushes is bad. That's fantastic, because I still use some custom brushes.
Yeah.
But I don't. For the most part, I mean, my brush settings are pretty much. I change size and I'll bring hardness to a different level. My flows are usually at 100%, and I don't even really check a lot of stuff on. Sometimes I'll check on pressure sensitivity, but I use opacity a lot to get my different levels of colors and values.
Yeah, and really just like knocking out art elements with a combination of default brushes and layer styles is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
You can do 98% of the work with just those things.
And change the size.
Mm-hmm.
Let me up the brightness on this because it's as bright as it goes.
Oops.
And you know what? Let's. And you can see already, even just with placing in a couple simple colors and masks. Go in and do this.
Was Nicholas Cavallo asking about exporting? You might have to scroll up. He's asking about exporting XD artboards as a flowchart. I think. I can't see his comment though.
As a flowchart, yeah.
Is that what he was saying?
Yeah.
Just like how you do it. I mean, I guess one way to do it is once you have artboards. Good. I'm glad I didn't butcher it. It's also so hard to read from over here too. One of the things you could do is you could take your artboards, right, and you could just make one really giant artboard that's just a single one, and then you could do something like this. So I'll just make a new one here. I'll show you a quick example of how I might go about doing it. So we'll say this is artboard flowchart, and then we'll get rid of this stuff. Unlock that, delete that. So like I would just make like a really huge artboard like this. And then I would just take some screens, some of these guys. So like take this and select all of it. I might have to unlock the background to actually get the, I have to unlock the background to actually copy it. So this is kind of a pain because you have to unlock stuff and lock stuff. But basically do that. And then grab another one. Oops, gotta unlock that too. Paste that in, move it. And then just keep layering these guys in here. Gotta unlock this background too. So just for expediency's sake, let's say this is all we wanted to do. Should be able to just shrink this guy. No, I'm not going to be able to shrink this because this is a symbol. I'm just going to break everything. I'll just unsymbol these. Ungroup symbol, all of those guys. Now I should be able to shrink them. So then you could just, if you're worried about these breaking apart, you can just group them. So now you can click on anything in there and not worry about breaking them apart. And then you could just kind of start splitting these apart. And then I could steal my flowchart arrow over here that I already made. Just grab that and paste it in here.
I just realized the green I'm using is green screening out.
Oh, is it?
It's funny. Yeah. Not when it's bigger, it's when it's smaller. It actually.
Oh, wow.
It's funny.
Color problems with green screens.
Uh-huh.
Always hilarious. And then I would just, start layering in these arrows so I could kind of indicate the flow of those screens. Oops, I broke that group. But yeah, it would be something like that. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea, because you can just scale these down really small and you don't actually need to see the details. You just understand that, like, oh, this is different content on the screen, and then you could basically label these as well, right? So you could just take these artboard names and put them in here as text, and then you would just save this out as a flowchart. Save this out, right? So there's not a quick way to just export all the screens, say from the prototype. If you link all the screens together through a prototype and you want that to be exported as a flowchart, it doesn't really do that, although that might be a cool future feature.
Future.
Mm-hmm.
Future.
Try to say that 5 times fast. Anyway. Yeah,
Okay,
cool.
So what I'll do here is I'll go in and I create my base layer. Let's turn this off too. So I'm bringing in some variants in colors, some complements, some magentas, and I'm making sure my value is at any time, and typically I'll do this too. Saturation. I'll make sure that my values are reading. Now right now, look at that. I completely lose the bottom if color's the only piece of information that's actually allowing me to see it. So probably what I'll end up doing is I'll definitely be pushing some of these colors back so that, that's already feels a little bit better. It's reading a little bit better.
You got that nice glow.
Yeah.
Feels
so
like lighting.
I have the lighting glow right now that's a little more extreme because this is the destructive part I talked about. So I'm going to be going in, and sometimes I'll take my mouse actually to do this, and I use the marquee tool, the polygonal marquee tool.
I like to refer to this as photo chopping.
This is definitely photo chopping to the extreme. Let me just look to see. So I will go into these shapes and start putting in a lighting source. So I'm going to pick my lighting source as since I've decided it's a little brighter in the middle of the logo, my lighting source is going to be somewhere here in the middle. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to, on this layer that I have right here, I'm going to start hacking away shapes. And by the way, this is a little bit like step 1 to draw an owl, draw a circle. Step 2, there's an owl. A lot of this is just understanding, a lot of studying about lighting, how light falls, light sources. So I'm going to begin just kind of hacking away and painting away at some of the
Chat like
shapes.
vignetting.
Yeah. And you've switched to a mouse now. How
Yes.
can you switch from the pen tool to the mouse?
I'm going. I can use a pen tool as well, but I'm going to be doing polygonal points, and it's just so much easier for me to just kind of basically switch it up to a mouse, because I can just click all the. I'm basically making stop points right now.
How often do you find yourself actually switching the physical tools you work with while you're making something like this?
Quite often, I go
Really?
between my pen and my mouse. In about a 6-hour work session, I'll go back and forth between my pen and my mouse if I'm doing illustration stuff. Anywhere between 20 to 40 times.
Oh, wow.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
Quite often. Whatever tool is best for the job, I'll use that.
Yeah, I tend to do that too a lot. If I'm doing artwork stuff, I'll do basically it's very similar. Although Nick tends to paint a lot more than I do, because I'm bad at it.
Another thing, don't have to worry about being super accurate with these. I think people worry about how are you deciding to lay down these shapes. It's more just sort of my background knowledge of knowing. I just have one basic lighting source right now, and so I'm just kind of going in and making sure that lighting source reads. I've got an awning here. The light source wouldn't go under the awning, so I'm going to delete it like that. And sometimes this stuff seems so simple, but when it's zoomed out and then I push it back, it just gives a little bit of definition and shape, just enough for me to kind of.
Nathan's asking, how are you filling that selection?
How am I filling it?
Yeah.
I painted it in, and now I'm actually removing.
Oh, okay.
So right now, this is fully destructive.
You're cutting.
I'm actually cutting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I got into a habit of being more destructive with my work because it actually added a lot of confidence to my line work and the decisions I was making with design.
Have you ever really regretted something that you
all the
destroyed?
time. And then, but here's the thing: because I work that way, if I had to go back and fix some of this stuff, To be honest, some of these vectors, if we had a little bit more time, like these are a little skewed and a little off. Like I would probably go in and fix some of these things. But overall, it doesn't change the feel that the thing is giving. So I'm not super concerned with it.
Just going in there and chopping away.
I'm just chopping away because
chopping down trees.
In the end, like I don't know if like. Obviously, we practice this. We have comps of what we're doing beforehand. In the end, I don't know if what I'm doing right now I'm going to like. So spending a lot of time on it might be really, really detrimental. If I really, really like it and the client's like, that's the look and feel I want to go with, if they needed a higher resolution, I'll sometimes go in and just recreate some stuff in vectors. But that's actually not as difficult to do because I know I don't have to. The cognitive load of thinking about the design is done. I'm what I call headphones work. You just put on headphones and you know exactly what you need to do. You put on music.
You forget to eat lunch.
Yeah.
That happens quite often.
Find out you're still in your pajamas. It's been like
that happens.
12 hours.
We're working from home, and I work from Austin, and Nick works from San Francisco. And we often will be bantering back and forth about things we're working on, and kind of working through problems or having conversations about things, and then we realize, it's 5 or 6 in the evening, and we haven't eaten anything, and we've just had coffee. Just
don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. It's bad for you.
Doesn't it feel so productive at the end? You're like,
it does
wow.
feel very productive, but it has a price.
Like, I need to see daylight.
It definitely has a price.
You're like, oh, look at this thing outside my house. What's that?
The sun?
Yeah. The day star.
The day star.
So I'm just putting in some controls at the bottom. This is a fairly common console thing to do, where you just have the controls spelled out on the screen.
I think, Nick, the layer panel is blocked, and I think some folks are asking if they could take a little closer look at what you have in your layer panel right now.
Sure. Yep, there.
So you don't name your layers
meticulously? I go back and name my layers.
We talked about this yesterday, so there's been numerous occasions in the past where I've had to go into Nick's files to like grab some icons or something like that, and it's not uncommon to run across layer 3672. It just happens. I do it too. Like when you're working very quickly, a lot of times best practices go out the window for the sake of expediency. So and then you end up having to like go back and clean stuff up before, of course, especially if we're pushing stuff to a client. You need to be able to open that file and pull content from it, and if it's a disaster and there's no layer names or anything, it's not going to be very friendly for another developer to take it and use it. So we end up having to do due diligence whether we want to or not.
Do you have a record for a number of layers you found in one of Nick's files?
Oh gosh, I mean 3,000's like pretty up there.
A little over 2,700 was when I was working on Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah.
Some of that isn't because there's that many layers in there. You're working off of a file that has a history, so you're deleting things.
You're doing new layer, and it's creating layer 3,700, not because there's 3,700 layers in there, but because you've created and deleted so many layers, and you merge stuff, and it doesn't renumber stuff based off of merges and stuff, so you just end up with very inflated numbers. I think it was probably closer to 2,600 or 2,700 actual layers in the file, but that also happens too, like when you have a bunch of icons that you might be creating that have lots of variants. So there's like, you have a spell that is poison and fire and ice, but they all have like similar silhouettes. You might stack them on top of each other inside of a icon file, or you may have like a character set of icons that belong to a specific character, and then you just do all of those icons stacked on top of each other inside that one PSD, so they're easy to export. And obviously if you have like a game like World of Warcraft or something where you have thousands and thousands and thousands of icons. You don't want that all in one Photoshop file because that becomes very unwieldy very quickly.
I think someone mentioned that it's very interesting to see that you're working in Photoshop. The style that you're using really does kind of harken to that of what you would expect to see in Illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
How do you choose what app you work in for what?
Yesterday I did my main blockouts in Animate because I choose that as a vector drawing program. I very rarely use Illustrator just because I don't move fast in it. I've seen people move blazingly fast in Illustrator. I think it's really interesting to point out it's not the process, it's the result. So this gets me to the result fastest. And some of the stuff I'm doing right now seems like it would be better to do in Illustrator, and you could completely do all this in Illustrator. There's no reason that you couldn't do it. This allows me to work in a way that's a little more painterly. I can paint things, I can deconstruct them, I can just grab pixels, move them around. I enjoy working in that way. It's kind of like an interesting thrash that I kind of work within. It allows me to, it allows me to get the 10 bad ideas out before the good one comes through.
Yeah.
And Photoshop, I find that because it's a roster program, I have every tool that I want to use as far as gradients and manipulation and colors. And someone might come back and go, Illustrator has all those too. I get it. Like this is not a competition. It's literally, this is my workflow.
It's how you want to work best.
It's how I work best.
Yeah.
It's how I work fastest. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you who are just tuning in, we're having a contest this week. It's create a three slide or more, or 3 screen or more XD prototype around the theme of food, which one of my favorite themes. I'm very excited about that
We
theme.
all love food.
Yeah. And so go ahead and submit it in the chat pod. And in about, I think, an hour, we're going to be selecting a winner. The winner gets a free CC subscription,
awesome.
which is, man,
Can't
it's like
beat that.
gold.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So please feel free to go ahead and submit through the chat pod, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at a few submissions now. So the first one we have to look at right here, I think it's from Ryan. He is taking a little bit more of a wireframey approach, which I really appreciate. I like it when people take that kind of approach from the very beginning, work out all the flows.
Yeah.
Logos still pending. I like how this is kind of gray boxed here with the social media icons.
Yeah, this tends to be how I tend to work as well. A lot of just low contrast or high contrast content with not tons and tons of art details, because those things always change.
I like how though there's still like enough content here to be able to tell a story.
For sure.
Who doesn't like cotton candy donuts? What kind of...
That's so much sugar in one compact bomb.
That's a little too much, I think, for me. Confirm. I like this confirmation flow here.
Buy those donuts.
Yeah. So overall, this is a really nice submission.
Yeah, it's cool.
I think it's refreshing to see someone really kind of starting at that low fidelity.
Yeah, it's very clean.
Yeah. And I like how the information, just enough information is there for you to understand the flow. Excellent. So the next submission is Food Express. Let's take a look through this one. I like this color gradient here at the front. Log in. Nice slide in there. We have
Everybody loves the maps.
Maps are fun.
Yeah, they are. Those are nice buttons.
These are really nice big buttons. A lot of border radius.
I like the key art in the background as a contrasting element. It's really nice.
Yeah, gives you enough information without taking up too much space.
Text might be a little bit small to read on a phone, for example.
It's a little tough to read, especially that secondary text below the main header text.
You could blow those up a little bit and still capture the same effect.
Yeah. I think I like how the buttons though are really big and chunky for touch.
Yeah, it's nice.
And moving on, I think.
Find some rolls.
Yeah. In contrast, though, it's interesting. We went from really big chunky buttons to then you have this call to action that's a little smaller. I think probably trying to shore
From
that
a
up.
visual
Keep it-
standpoint, it might be nice to make them a little more visually similar.
Yeah. I think that would help. Though the green does give it's a nice
It
indicator
could still
with color.
be a big green button at the bottom.
Yeah. And a
That's
big
nice.
thank you at the end. I think that's a nice kind of touch there at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see, I can't find the. There we go. Oh, okay. So it brings you back to the login screen. So yeah, overall that's a nice experience. I think there's definitely some consistency stuff that could be improved upon,
Yeah.
but overall a nice flow from beginning to
The
end.
black and the white and the orange is nice, and it's nice contrast, and subtle use of color is nice.
Yeah. Let's take a look next at this. It's actually a game app. It's not on. It's not on theme today, but I think we're gonna take a look anyway.
Sure.
So it's got this kind of nice, interesting starter where it's this bouncing ball. Sign in. So I like this kind of like really graphic, flat approach
Yeah.
to the visual design that they took here.
I like the animation storyboards.
Yeah, that was nice.
Kind of nice.
Faking in animation where we can't do animation yet.
Yeah.
That's nice. So this looks like a purchase screen.
Purchase screen. We've got nice big kind of form fields here. Let's see. Go through the purchase process. Check out.
Something I would note right there is just some fields you'll see it on other apps or whatever. Rather than choosing the credit card type ahead of time, as soon as you type in the digits, usually there's ways to identify what brand the credit card is, just off the serial number or the credit card number. So that might be a better flow, and it'll clean that screen up. You won't have to have every credit card on there.
I think, one of our folks chiming in are saying that we have to click those first screens really fast.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha.
I wasn't clicking fast enough.
Right. Otherwise,
so
it doesn't
like
animate
that.
properly. There you go.
There we go. But then, it's tough to know
and it
exactly.
becomes the logo. Yeah, that's clever.
that is really cool to kind of have set that up like that.
It works
Yeah,
well for this particular
It does.
use case.
And I really
It's cool.
like this aesthetic that's going on here. Nice submission. And then the last submission we're going to look at for right now is, I think, from Maria. It's Coffee Geek. Really,
Nice fonts.
Really liking
Ooh,
that
I like
font.
that.
Yeah, this is a really strong submission. Nice big chunky buttons here. I like how that kind of progressively loads in. Enter your password. Turns to nice teal. Really nice. I like these icons. The iconography
Well done.
feels really, really good.
Oh.
Big chunky check.
Yeah,
really
that's
nice.
nice. It's
That's
very
great.
clear.
Again, a nice place to kind of bring in that font.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder, I don't know that font off the top of my head, but that's a nice.
Yeah, I don't
It's
right.
definitely a flavor font that
Yeah.
it's not a typical font.
But it adds an element
nice.
of interest, right?
It's definitely
it
nice,
breaks
yeah.
up the design well.
I like their subtle use of the Starbucks green.
Yeah, it's just a little bit. But it provides a nice contrast against that purple. It's an interest. It's kind of in line a little bit towards the color scheme we're using here today with the
Yeah, a
purple
little
and the
purple and teal
Yeah,
vibe
Purple
going
and
on.
teal.
teal vibe, yep.
everything's kind of lining up. Oh, I like how they've used the coffee mug here to indicate the number cups.
Very clever.
Yeah, that's
Well done.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard sometimes to not to use an element like that and not push it too far to the point that it's.
Yeah,
But this
you can
is
definitely it can become obnoxious, or it can become very repetitious, where it's just the same thing over and over again and it stops having any impact. But this was subtly done, so
Yeah.
I think it works out.
the mug itself is graphic enough to
Yeah.
be able to hold that.
It's flat and it doesn't
yeah.
have a lot of shading and stuff to it.
So I think we're going back to this main screen. Go through. Well, let's try going through. Here we go. Coffeepedia.
Oh, this is like instructions on how to do these different types of coffee. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
this is
That's a
this
cool
is a
idea.
nice touch.
This person's working for their year.
Yeah, there you go. For sure.
Oh, and then you have this
The
nice
brewing timer, right?
brewing
Yep.
timer.
Yeah.
I like that. I like how nice and big the digits are
Yeah.
here. So you can set
Very
it
nice.
down. prop it up while
in
you're
Italy,
running.
I've heard that you literally have to serve espresso in 30 seconds after it's done. Otherwise, it can't be served to a customer.
Really?
Yeah, it's like some crazy law they have that's literally about the time that espresso is served to a customer.
I'm gonna go sit there at that coffee shop and I'm
just
gonna be
sit there
like,
with a
hand me
stopwatch."
all the ones that are 31 seconds and above.
Just feed them
And
to me.
my quality bar's fine.
Yeah,
It's
they'll be you'll have 50 games designed, and
Yep.
you'll just be sitting there typing like Jim Carrey from Bruce Almighty.
I wasn't prepared when I went to Italy for the number of rules around coffee.
Yeah, I have not been there, but I would like to go and experience that myself at some point.
yeah, sounds like a great place.
Well, overall, this is a great submission.
Yeah, I think that's really
I think
nice.
There's a lot of really strong elements here. I've enjoyed taking a look at it.
That is a strong contender.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive back in.
All right, so
Alrighty.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of, because I'd really like to start moving on to some of the other screens, because the start screen's interesting, but I think some of the other stuff we have
Yeah.
is a little more interesting. So I'm going to show kind of where we ended up with this. So here's kind of where we kind of landed, but then, so what I'll end up doing is going in and I put clouds, I put some glowy stars in the background, add a little glow to the logo, really pushed my values and my contrasts.
The contrast between the background colors and the saturation of those colors and the actual logo is really important because that's what's causing the logo to feel like it's
Yeah.
present and popping out over that.
It can set a tone.
landscape.
You can almost picture it doing an animation or bouncing
Right.
or a witch flying in the background or bats flying. You know,
Right.
like if you can kind of picture that scene, then I think we're going in a good place. And I think it's really important to go, okay, I think we have our tones. Even our light blue tones that are going on here in the stars, which by the way are just little polygons that I squished, square polygons. So again, you don't have to, like, they read as stars. You don't have to go in and individually make sure that they have glowing lights. Although if that's the style you're going for, by all means, do that as well. This is a really simple, blocky style. We chose it for that reason, because we could knock out as much work as we could in these 3 sessions. So I think this is pretty good. I think this is what a look and feel that we're going for. It kind of gives that trick-or-treaty vibe.
Sure.
It's got our color schemes. It's got our font and our logo and our art style. So I think we're going to start building some of the other screens off of that. And I think Ian right now is you're building out the
character creation
screens.
Yeah, I only have a couple screens
Yeah.
to do on here, and then if do you want to start working on Kevin?
Yeah. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll have moments where one of us is blocked. Right? The other one is waiting on the other one for something, but there's always elements one of us can start picking up on and start doing. So I know Ian's doing a character creation screen. I got, let's just say in this theoretical universe, I got an asset from the client for Kevin. And I did go ahead and make an asset for Kevin. I did a character design for him. And so I'm gonna pull that up and I'm gonna show how I prep an unfinished polygonal character.
Yeah.
To mesh in and work with the UI. And I think once I start showing you some of the files, some of that will make sense. So
Nick and I have been playing around in Google Blocks, building 3D assets in VR. And so this is actually one of the assets Nick built specifically for this. And then we'll be taking basically the raw export of that file, and then he'll do a little paint over for it.
So here we have. So this is a screenshot from the web of Kevin. We made Kevin. Obviously, all of our characters in our game are going to follow a horror theme, right? So
Little
those
Hellraiser.
who are fans of Hellraiser, we have a little pinhead guy, and to soften him up a little bit, he has a little magical pet follower,
cat.
which is his cat, which is actually my cat.
Do
Dory.
you do that? Do you just work like your pet sometimes? Your
I'll do that all the time.
Yeah.
Just little Easter eggs for
you use
yourself.
what's around you as reference a lot, if it's appropriate, right? Like, this was, to be fair, this was my concept, so I can kind of do whatever, right? I'm gonna put he's gonna be floating the cube, right? He's gonna have this menacing look, but he's gonna be standing on phone books to look more menacing, right? And he's gonna have a little kitty looking up at the block next to him. So I'm gonna show a little bit of kind of process of like how we take something that basically and sometimes we get assets that are almost this raw, even for a game that's high fidelity, because they're in very baby stages of blocking out characters or don't really have it finished. So that's why I also use this as like this character doesn't have a lot of lighting, it doesn't have a lot of shape, and if I just popped out the green screen on the background and put him into our character screens, he's going to look a little flat and he's not going to really integrate too well.
I could take this right now as is and start using him in here. It doesn't really matter because this isn't final art, but Nick's gonna dress him up anyway.
So what I did is I used an online program. I took blocks into an online program called Sketchfab, and Sketchfab is just it's a website and it's a community for 3D artists. But they also have the ability to add lights and rendering. So I can go in and just all I'm trying to do is block out simple shapes and give me basic lighting. So obviously I wanted his cube to have some bloom and some glow, and I wanted there to be some what they call rim lighting. So that green lighting around there is called rim lighting. It helps define the edge of a character. So I want him to pop off the screen when he's sitting in these screens. So this is I'm probably going to be pulling this file in and showing you kind of in Photoshop how I prep this file and make it a little bit more ready and kind of settle it into a screen as Ian designs the inventory screens and the character creation screens.
Awesome.
So real quick, I'll just show a little trick that I use sometimes. So you can see on the screen, if this is going to be this rendered character, there's all this noise behind these elements, and that's going to kind of cause problems. And so one of the things that we can do in a lot of game engines is have soft fades or have edge vignettes that overlay things so that we can have a little more control over when things like this happen where they crash into elements and it causes visual issues. And so in XD, I'm just gonna fake it by putting this behind everything, and then I'm just gonna turn off the border. I'm gonna sample the background color, and I'm gonna make a gradient that's gonna act like a mask. Just a little cheat. So I'll take this color and I'm gonna fade it to the exact same color. So now it's all the way across, and I'm just gonna take the endpoint and make it transparent. I gotta make the other side transparent so it's not the endpoint. And now I can just take this and drag it up, and I can adjust the gradient to be a little more intense at the bottom, so it kind of cuts it off there. So see, I'm starting to create a gap between that and the content. So I just want it to kind of fade out so it just kind of looks like it's ducking behind the controls so they're still legible. Just a little cheat. And it doesn't look like much on this. It'll look much nicer once we have an actual Kevin and not my top figure here. And I'll just paste it into here. Move these bits back. Gotta move Kevin back. So yeah, now I'm just gonna grid out these selections. So we're gonna say like, this is gonna be the hairstyle selection. So basically this is like, imagine you come in to create your character and you can pick a hairstyle, you can pick a face and a starting costume. So if you click on hairstyle, then you go over here and then you can choose hairstyle and the color. And then if you choose hairstyle, then it's going to go into a grid of a bunch of different hairstyles that you can choose from. So in this case, I'm actually just going to use a repeat grid here because I love this tool.
It is a great
fun,
tool,
isn't it?
It's the best.
especially it's practical. Like when you use it in a practical sense, you're like, yes.
Saves so much time.
So now I made a bunch of boxes. So these could be individual hairstyles, which we're not going to go and create today because we'd be here all day just watching me draw hair.
Sometimes we will do it though.
Yeah.
Like if
we'll fake in stuff. I mean, and when we do the HUD, we'll show some of the icons that we built, and I can show off some of my amazing shape layer skills in Photoshop.
Yeah.
That actually brings up a question I was thinking of as you were doing that. Like, when you're creating a flow like this, there's so many possibilities.
Yes.
Like, where
There's
do
so
you draw
many
the
branches.
line for what you end up actually creating for the client?
It really depends on the client. Sometimes they need more detail to really understand where things are going, and so, like, for this example, like, we could have like 100 hairstyles in here, and there's like a bunch of colors, and there's 14 heads and whatever. If we have all of those assets, we may go in and chop those assets up and rough them in, so that you can get a visual sense of what is happening. But like in this case, like, would we go through and do every single one of these and do this? It depends. Like, in this case, if you're just going through here, I might do the sub-selections for face to show like what options are in the face selection. But I might not do this screen because it's essentially a template for everything, right?
So you're kind of creating templates as you go.
Right. And if the client wants to see this as like the faces, you know, it's just renaming this as face selection or whatever the title is, and then all of that. Yeah, Nick, somebody was asking in chat how Nick made the character, and it's in Google Blocks, which is VR software that lets you basically build 3D really low poly models in 3D in VR. It uses touch controllers, and if you have room scale, you can like fully turn models around and manipulate them and stuff. It's really fun. It's really cool to use.
Google Blocks.
It's free too.
Oculus Medium. Yeah, Google Blocks is free. Oculus Medium and is free if you order touch controllers.
Yeah.
I highly advise anyone who's interested in doing 3D, but 3D software was too intimidating to get into. I highly advise them to check out if they have the ability to kind of play around, or they have a VR headset with touch controllers or a Vive headset with controllers, to go check it out, because I think it's obviously early days in these types of software, but the potential to speed up process is amazing. And for me, the ability to walk around my model and look and peek and turn it,
it's a lot more intuitive than
Yeah.
staring at a flat screen and trying to twist things so that you can see various perspectives.
Yep.
It's a neat way to work, especially if you haven't done it before. It's pretty, it's very limited, but that makes it very easy to use. Kind of like XD. It doesn't have a ton of features, but that's one of the reasons we like it. So I'm just doing like a little error screen if you try to back out of your character creation without finishing it.
Dude, I forgot how much of a pain it is because he has pins on his head.
Oh yeah. Should have designed it without pins.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna use the fancy blur frame here.
Freddy Krueger would have been easier, right?
Yeah, just the hat.
Just that. Well, he does have knife hands, so there is that.
There is that.
All right, that's pretty much done, anyways.
Someone's asking how you would export the model out. There's options once you they have a publish button inside Blocks, and you click the publish button and it puts it up on the web, which you can make it private. And when you do that, you can basically go and download it as an FBX, which will import FXB, which will import directly into engines like Unreal. And you can also export it as an OBJ, which will give you material files, and then you could pull it into a program like Blender or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Someone says someone's
Yeah,
Mac's
that's
about
mine.
to take off.
I don't know. All I did was open a few submissions. So
Too much web
yeah,
power.
I'm not sure why it's starting to rev up. But I think I was going to ask you about the Blocks, the Blocks app. What would you say the learning curve is there? Like, is this something that you have to have a bit of a background in 3D in to dive into, or would you say someone with graphic design knowledge could even start out trying some stuff?
Yeah, I definitely think it's fairly easy to get into without too much trouble. I mean, there doesn't have a ton of options. You basically can slap primitives together and drag stuff around, or import other people's models, because they have a website where you can just download other people's work, and then just play around with stuff, or just examine it and see how it's built. And that's a really good learning tool too. But there's only a handful of tools. It's relatively intuitive. There's actually a couple of blogs you can Google, and they go through all the different things that you can do and what they're used for. If you're not familiar, you can kind of get a rundown of like how the hotkeys work with the Vive controller wands or with the touch controllers.
Interesting.
And they have pretty extensive breakdowns, and there's even people on YouTube that do live demonstrations too, so you can always just go watch people do it and see if that's something that seems interesting to you or seems like you can understand it.
Yeah, because
It should be pretty easy.
a lot of 3D software.
It's very intimidating.
Yes.
It's very intimidating.
It's not unlike trying to learn Photoshop today with all the features in it and everything. It can be very intimidating,
But very powerful.
It is very powerful. I consider myself lucky because I started learning Photoshop in version 2.
Yeah.
When there was
Like
no
before
layers.
layers, yeah.
So like I got baby steps of all the like every time there was a new set of like 10 or 5 features, I got to learn them in like bite-sized chunks as we went. Which was a much easier. Now it's like, so how do you change the color of something in Photoshop? That's a loaded question because there's like 100 different ways to do it, and it
they're
depends.
all the right ways, though.
Yeah, and it depends. Well, and it also depends on your context and how you want to use
Yeah.
it, and how you want to export it, and whether you want it to be destructive or non-destructive, and if you're using vectors or raster, and there's 100 ways to go. So.
Nathan's asking, what post app did you use to create the glow effect for the character?
I used an online tool called Sketchfab.
Yeah.
And both these tools, like, and I would say, going back to the earlier question about
Sketchfab is awesome.
Sketchfab is fantastic. I would say that going back to the earlier question of like, what's the ramp up on these tools? The ramp up on these tools is very little. The spot where you're going to be having frustration is if you don't know how to visualize something in a 3D space. That's where...
That's really hard. I mean, like, it's much more, I think, in line with doing something like sculpture or pottery.
It is much more...
IRL.
I was going to say, yeah.
It's that mixed with understanding cinematography a little bit, because there's depth of field involved. There's lighting. And so there's a little bit of photography. There's a little bit of cinematography. There's sculpting and things like that, perspective and getting angles and just exaggerating stuff. If you were going to draw something exaggerated, you kind of have to understand those proportions. And if you're dealing with a 3D model, which you can spin around, you have to even understand that more so because you have all the depth and everything else, the way things collide and all that sort of thing. So...
And so now are you smoothing out the
I'm
polygons?
smoothing out some of the polys. This is it's basically just to make it look smoother when it's lower. And this is definitely one thing where I'm going to go and here's how it looks when it's all done, because this is hours. This is a couple hours of work really getting this prepped and ready. But we're going to be using this guy as a demonstration on many screens. We don't have to do this. We could completely convey the art direction through just some simple levels and some simple blooms and some simple cheats, like getting them there. And I'll be using those cheats as well. But I'm also doing some hand painting to make sure it kind of looks a little extra special. especially when we hand something off to a client, having something just feel rounded and nice. Because they can also, like when they send us, sometimes they send us in this rough state, it's nice to sort of see like, well, this is visually what it would look like kind of as a demonstration. Obviously your art director and your artist can do whatever they want to from this point forward, but it gives you an idea of like what it'll look like once it kind of integrates into the UI, which it's usually worth the couple extra hours putting into it.
So it is like hours of work.
This is not fast doing this stuff. You can get faster at it. There's definitely tips and techniques, but even modeling this stuff takes a pretty decent amount of time. So, but that also, we wouldn't, unless we're talking about icons, we wouldn't be modeling this stuff ourselves. We would be getting this in a rough format from the client and then spending a couple hours making it look pretty, especially if we're going to be using it across screens.
We went the extra mile for you guys.
Yep.
How many characters do you generally create for a client?
Yeah, we usually don't do it. Like
we did it for this
did it for
presentation.
this?
Yeah. This is not something that we generally do for clients. Clients usually have their own art direction already done.
Okay.
They might not have art direction for the UI, but they have an art direction or a style for their game. They have characters for the game.
But if somebody came to you and wanted a character, would you be like, hell yeah, or no, we don't
Maybe.
do that?
I would say for the most part, no. The reason is there are people out there who are really good at character creation, and put it this way. We would definitely reference them because we have friends who do freelance and consulting as well, and we definitely contact them and go, hey, someone wants a character creator for this time, and then we can work together. They're confident that they're coming through a referral. That person they like the work we do. They obviously feel a little more trusted with the artists that we refer.
In that regard, you're really being the creative director.
Yes.
For that aspect of the game.
Totally.
That's cool.
Well, most of the time, the client is the creative director, but we are helping them in any way possible. If they're like, I don't really I understand creative direction, but UI, especially even UI outsource in gaming, is not it's not a common thing. It's not like, oh, I know what UI outsource is. It takes a little bit of little education in the process and how we work with people, and typically they're like, oh, it's like our process, but it's just a little more catered towards the UI end of stuff.
So for those of you who are just tuning in, we are looking at XD prototypes for our contest this week. The theme is food, and we're going to take a look at a few more submissions that we have. If you have a submission yourself, go ahead and drop it in the chat pod, and we'll take a look and give you some feedback. We're going to start out first with this one, which is it's got some really nice colors going on.
That's
I like
nice.
the diagonals. They're taking some really interesting chances with how they're actually moving or creating the
Meaty meat.
yes. So let's move through. I like
With nice icons.
the iconography is really nice.
Yeah, I like this.
Got this kind of flip through explanation. I like that.
Little onboarding.
Oh yeah. And so, and here you have this kind of like recipe or step-by-step aspect of it. So this overall, let's kind of go back to the first. So What to Eat is the name of this one. So
Gotcha.
Cook Now, I like that.
It's like a recipe instruction app.
Yeah, kind of like, like the Blue Apron type thing, but like right there on your phone. I like that concept a lot, and it's a nice execution with the iconography and excellent.
Good use of key art.
Great submission. Next one up is Eat Me. Swipe to find a bite. Let's log in and see what we get here. Start with some nice colorful photography.
Love it or not.
See, I'm not supposed to. There we go. Big Pokey fan. Let's see. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I like how that kind of swiped
really
in like
nice.
that.
Well done.
This design is really nice with the composition here, how they have everything kind of laid out.
I also liked their logo. Is worth mentioning on the front page.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah. The Eat Me.
The tongue in the
It's a little abstract.
It's obviously tongue in cheek.
yeah.
But yeah, this is a great execution. I think that there's a lot of playfulness here. That's nice. A little bit of having fun with the submission process, and even just like in the way they've kind of put "nah" in there. It's kind of a really fun concept.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well done.
excellent. Next one we have is food. Make every bite count. So let's get started with that one. Submit. I like this login screen. I like the kind of like light watermarked background that they have going on here. So this is very much kind of like a Yelpish type app where you have your find your food. I think they did a nice job here with creating a screen that repeats like this.
Chuck E. Cheese is done.
I haven't been to a Chuck E. Cheese in so long.
You don't want to.
No.
Let's see. Let's go to the map view. A nice map view.
Cool.
Love the map view.
Are the pins clickable?
Oh yes, here we go. In and out. Nice choice for a feature. List view. So you can kind of toggle back between those two things. That's nice. Let's go on to. Yeah, there we go. Log out.
Cool.
Nice.
Very
Overall,
Nice logo
great
too.
submission. Yeah, a lot of really good logos today. I feel
Got
like.
the Homer Simpson
You have the
style
Homer Simpson
donut.
donut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simpsons donut.
The next one is make your burger. Create your own burger in a couple of minutes. So this is kind of like a recipe specific to burgers.
Right.
If you're gonna pick a food to do that with, burger's my favorite. Locate me or type my address. Let's try locate me. Allow. Let's go through and try. Okay, excellent. So they really do all types of burgers. With the meat and fish. I like the way this is kind of got this nice rounded edge here overlay.
Yeah, and they're doing left and right flipping. If you go back one page, the previous page had them on the right side.
Oh, I think we've gotten too deep into this prototype to go back and forth. This is a pretty big prototype. There's 30 screens for this one, so
Wow.
I want to make sure that I get through all of them, but I have to actually find my way through it. Let's try. There we go.
That's what I was talking about. Was the left side, and then it flips right.
Let's see if we can. I think we'll have to go forward on this one.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like anything else is clickable.
There we go. So overall, there's some really nice aspects to this prototype in general. I think that it's nice the way they've kind of really used the space and layered a lot of flat elements, but on top of the photography.
Yeah.
A lot of screens here. They covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So great submission.
I like the little vector burgers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the vector burgers are pretty cool. A lot of detail in
Mustard and
there.
ketchup in there. Is that what that is?
Yeah. Let's see if. Oh, here we go. We got an order.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
It's like they're sliding down the page. Very
Yeah.
cool.
So it really is about
I
the
really
left,
like the
right.
flow of that.
Yeah.
It's
that's
really
cool.
nice.
Yeah, and I like this when your order is going to arrive, giving you that timer. Great.
1:10 in the morning. That's a
late
after-
burger.
That's a someone's been drinking and wants a burger.
I didn't catch it. I was like, yeah, when was the last? Who's open that late?
No one.
So let's go ahead and check out Boom Room.
That's cool.
Boom Room. So play. Oh, I like this is a little bit different. This the orientation here.
iPad app.
Yeah, it's a wide iPad app. No connection. So this is. I think we've got 5 screens here, and it really is. Let's see. There we go. So yeah, it's just basically kind of like the beginning of the app. So it's just getting started, beginning to define a look and feel for this one. But I like how playful it is, and I like the fact that they've taken a little bit of a different approach with the
That character.
That character's great.
the 3 eyes are pretty good. Awesome. So keep the submissions coming. We're gonna dive back into taking a look at where you guys are now.
Yeah.
So I could keep painting on this guy. This is gonna go slow.
Yeah, we should probably just export him out and start.
Yeah, here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little bit of the, and then it's done.
First draw a circle, and then it's an owl.
We're just gonna beat that joke into the ground, man.
Why
It's
not?
just- yeah.
Everybody loves it. Just gonna have to go lighter.
Without ruining something that we're going to be doing later, I'm going to open this screen. You might want to just flip to Ian's screen for a second here so that I can pull this file out. Cool. Thanks.
I'm just making a little, if you hit back before your character is done being created, little error screen. So you can jump back to your editing or return to the main menu. And then once Nick gets Kevin exported, we'll drop him in here.
So this is kind of where I would stop. Obviously, there's still some pixelization. I rounded out some of the fingers. I kind of pushed some of the room lighting around the kitty cat and stuff, and a little more contrast in his eyes. And kind of just went in and gave a gradient from the top, so his focus is more kind of on his chest and face and on the cube. So the areas of focus that I kind of want to push it. And then I pushed a little more rim lighting around his hands and stuff to just give him a little bit more oomph. So now this is at the point where Ian's like, oh, cool, you're done with that? Can you export out a grayscale version of that so that I can...
and for the sake of time, we'll just cheat and pretend Nick did that, and I'll go grab the exported asset.
Okay, yeah. Because exporting something on live stream is not really that interesting.
It's pretty boring. let's face it. Just jump in here.
So now we kind of, just to review, we kind of have this screen where we have our from the art standpoint, we have this screen, our start screen, we have our kind of art direction going, and I've prepped the raw file that was given to me from the client, which looked much more like this, and I've just cleaned it up and prepped it and made it ready for our screen. So I'm just doing this is art 101 stuff, right? Values, contrast, color, complementary colors. This is all stuff that like year one art school stuff that you're like, oh, why do I have to learn this stuff? And you realize it's what you're going to be practicing for the rest of your life all the time. Those rules of thirds, those things never change, and people call them tricks. They're not tricks. They're just what we find visually appealing.
So there's Kevin. So now I can delete my bobble top guy.
I'm gonna sit back and watch you for a bit.
That's cool. So we've got him in here. So right now I'm already realizing this isn't really working because this background is way too dark. So I'm gonna lighten this up a little bit, which is you'll notice that I made this a symbol so that when I do this and change this color, it's going to change on everything at once. I don't have to select the artboards individually because that's a pain in the butt. So we'll get it about there-ish. Looks good.
It's also important to note that like the more we have locked in for art direction and I can give to Ian having an art background as well, I hand him things and he can start making some kind of just very base level art decisions in the wires as well, so that when I get the wireframes, I don't have to start there. It's kind of like a head start for me. So sometimes I'll pump assets back to him to make sure that like the client understands what's going on. Also, this is over the course of weeks. We're handing these files to clients, so they kind of want to see when we're talking about systems that they have some updated stuff that they've been seeing in the art, so they make the immediate association. Oh, this is the art we were just seeing. It's going to be available on this screen.
How long have the two of you worked together?
7 years now?
6 or 7 years, something like that.
Something close to that.
Yeah.
So how have you always worked this well together? Like it seems like you're kind of like, one hand, the other hand. You really gel very well.
Yeah.
So how did you get to the point where you're working that way today?
A lot of practice. I mean, we are not beholden to a specific like style or process in particular. So like we've tried a bunch of different stuff and see what works, what doesn't work, what's fast, what's slow, what works better for Nick in some instances, what might work better for me, and just kind of like just do what's fast, what works well, what gets the best results.
Not naming your layers.
Not naming your layers.
I would like to very much say that when we hand things off to clients, they are very cleaned up files.
Yeah.
Make them professional. They look correct. They're usable. I'm just using the gradient tool here to fake in a little shadow just because I thought it looked nice.
Yeah, I like
The
that.
shadow not export when I gave it?
It
Oh,
really
no,
is.
I didn't export it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I cut the shadow out of it when I
Never
exported
mind.
it specifically because I just wanted to just drop this in here cleanly.
The shadow also really helps to highlight the phone books, which you know
Yeah.
could be overlooked
Right.
really without it. Like it gives it that sense of depth.
And so here, I'm actually just going to grab him and blow him up because when you're working on your character, building your character, whatever, he's going to be close up. Make sure you're working on his head or whatever. That's cool. And then now I have to do a little fix because this is a little dark down here. Although it still works. The effect is the same. Still causes a nice transition between him and the buttons down there. But I don't really like the color being different, so I'm going to fix it. And swap it back to a gradient. Make sure I select that color. Paste that in there. Wrong. I always do that. Selected the last one, the wrong one last time too. Sweet. Now I got like a little vignette down there, so it just fades. So you can read the buttons nicely. And then this is just going to be the same over here. Pushing back. I'll copy pasta that in there as well.
Some terms stick around.
There we go. And then I can take this screen and we'll put this back here. Oops. That's right.
And I think it's important to note that we actually have a HUD screen that's fully finished and an inventory screen. And since we have one working session left after this, getting to both of them is going to be probably pretty difficult.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if the HUD, the next
probably more
session,
interesting.
is probably more interesting.
What
Because
does HUD stand for?
sorry,
something?
heads up display. So when these are all screens that are kind of when you're out of the game, or they're interstitial screens when you're doing something and altering the character. You play games, they have talent screens, they have skills. You're doing things to the character that alter the way the character works or acts in the game. Then there's actually, when you're in the game and playing, all the pieces of information that are around. We call it the HUD.
Gotcha.
Heads-up display. So it's not really entirely accurate because heads-up display is more like a first-person view. Like if I had Iron Man helmet's a great example, right? Iron Man has all of his heads-up display here, and he's got his little greeblies over here and telling him, how much power he's left in his suit and all the pieces of information that Iron Man needs. So that's more of a heads-up display, but we use it as a coin term anytime we're talking about the in-game HUD is always anything that's like while you're playing the game that's up.
Yeah. So you can see now, like this feels a little more substantial, just with a little bit of art in it. It feels like a little more of a, you get the idea of the concept here that we're going for in terms of kind of building your character. Good old Kevin.
Good old Kevin.
Someone actually asked a few minutes ago about using a style guide in XD, whether or not they would use libraries. Do you ever use libraries?
I do. So like this, well, in terms of, if they're talking about libraries in terms of like the Mac OS library or something like that, I don't really use those because it's not applicable to what we're doing. We're like, there is no PS4 library or Xbox 360 library.
But I think in XD, in the libraries panel, like if you're going to use like a style guide, like do you ever get style guides?
Yes. Well, we build them. So sometimes we'll get them from clients, but usually we'll build them. If they're talking about assets, like in the...
I think they're talking about Creative Cloud libraries.
Yeah,
Creative Cloud.
Because we don't,
Gotcha.
and actually we covered this last time.
Yeah.
I out of habit don't use Creative Cloud libraries because I used to have used to do freelance and I used to do work, and having 2 separate logins for Creative Cloud completely messed up my libraries. That's not an Adobe problem. That's just it just
There's
really
issues.
didn't work well between the two.
Yeah.
But I would say for a game, if we're deep into a client that's multiple months, I definitely use Adobe. I use Adobe libraries. I don't know if you use them much. Not really with XD. There's not a ton of reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I could save this to an Adobe library, but
Yeah. We could save like these PS4 assets or whatever out to a library.
if I find something repetitious and I'm doing it a lot, to peel that back, I definitely use smart objects a lot.
Yeah.
And I definitely use linked files a decent amount. So I'll link, if I have like a header on the game that I want to reuse in all my PSDs, I definitely save it out as a linked PSB, linked smart object. But I find that once I have linked smart objects, my need for libraries diminishes pretty quickly, my personal need.
Interesting. Well, we're down to about 10 minutes. We're going to take a look at a few of the last submissions, and then it's time for us to actually choose a winner for today.
Right.
So the next submission we have here is, I believe, the New Dimensions submission. So starting off, this looks like a loading screen. Ooh, really nice kind of way that they've handled this typography and this
Beef love bacon.
yeah this lower nav bar here. Some of the type's a little small, I think, for mobile.
Yeah.
But nice kind of use of like interesting fonts and the fact that
I like that the hamburger menu is a hamburger.
That's great. I didn't even realize
nice
that.
little, I didn't catch that. That's pretty
That's
great. So sliding into the next one, we have
It's literally
Beef.
this is really fun submission here. I like that there's a lot of really nice design elements that are coming together that are kind of
the
non-traditional.
little overlay arrows to let you know there's more. Is nice.
Yeah, it's kind of got this negative space here that they've taken from the other arrow. So let's see. Let's go ahead and go up to that hamburger menu. That's out. A nice little Easter egg for those who know what the hamburger menu is all about.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, it is really funny. I like that. That's a great submission.
Clever.
Yeah,
Yep.
wonderful. All right, moving on to the next one. Bite me, another play on words there. Let's go to the Explore. This nice overlay we have going on, kind of like the blurry background image. Appetizer, so you've got like a little bit of a list here. Soup, so it looks like it really does kind of, you go through each of the individual categories. I think nice iconography that kind of ties into the content, and then you can close out and go back to the first screen. I like how they've created this kind of use of space with the circle here on the front page. Maybe a little bit more padding in some of the buttons.
Yeah.
Yep.
Give it a little bit more space to breathe.
The logo could be a little busy, perhaps. Maybe pick one, either the utensils in the middle or the spoon. Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little too many things.
Yeah. Great submission, though.
Cool.
The next one, the Hungry. A little bit of a unique logo there.
That's a
some
great
style.
logo.
Yeah, some good style. Really big text on the buttons. And I love big form fields.
Yeah.
Lots of room to like type in.
Easy to click
Yep. Easy to click.
or tap in this case.
Yeah. You've got this nice kind of like watercolor background. Let's see where to click through next. Go back. I think this is a 4 screen, so overall I think this is a really nice design with
It's very clean.
very clean. I think that some spacing perhaps.
Yep. A little bit of padding.
A little bit of
Would be
padding
nice.
would help.
The blue is a little harsh on the background of the text box.
It might be nice to just take the blue and like they did with the logo background using a blur frame there, is to instead of the blue just use the blur frame there with a darker text and just insinuate the field without actually having it be as bold.
Yeah, I think that's some really good feedback there. Yeah. Color can be tricky, especially when you're bringing in imagery in the background. Excellent. And moving on to Himalayan food. I like this color scheme here. It's a little bit different than anything we've seen really today. But it works with the actual theme of the app. The typeface is a little tough to read, though it stylistically works with the theme. Let's go through.
It's pretty hard to read.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of room for improvement as far as like type and making sure it's legible. Maybe choosing a little bit more of a readable typeface, like a sans serif maybe.
Contrast between the background color and the foreground color for the copy is also important.
You wouldn't need the drop shadow if there was enough contrast, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think the drop shadow doesn't really do what it's intended here. It needs to be more of just like a contrasty color scheme. Yeah. And then this button down here is definitely a little small, especially for being a call to action.
The text is pretty small overall.
But I really like the feel of this app. The fact that it really embodies and I think they've made a really great design for trying to capture that. So that's the last one actually we have to look at for today. It's time for us to actually choose a winner.
I have two in my mind.
Yeah.
One, it was the darker background with the sort of filigree font. I can't remember
the coffee. I believe it's coffee.
The coffee one was really good.
That's in my top two as well.
And there was one that was like one or two after that. I can't remember.
There was one of the burger ones, and then the food one with the cool food logo. I forgot food book.
So let's go back. We had that burger one, the Make Your Burger one, which actually, my apologies, I didn't scroll down, but that's actually some pretty good feedback for knowing to like give some visual reference to scroll down.
An arrow or something.
Yeah. Let you know that there's more, or just a little fade so that it knows that there's more detail tucked under there.
But honing in, we have the coffee one, and then what was the other? You said it had a burger in it.
Food book.
Food book. Let's find
was the other one.
The food book.
It had a cool logo, and I think that was the one with a little onboarding.
Let's see. I need to pull that one up. Let me go ahead and see if I can find it. Okay. Yeah. Food book. There's food. Oh, yes. Here we go. Pull that one up next. This one, that logo. I really like that logo. Really cool. So we can go through this one again.
You had to log in, and then you get those ones. There's another one, the ones with the check marks and the circles. I think that was the coffee one.
That was the coffee one. Yeah. I actually think the coffee one is
the coffee one.
I mean,
so let's go ahead and I'll pull that up. Give me a second.
Coffee Geek wins.
Let's pull that one up. Yeah, Coffee Geek. Yes, that was from Maria.
I think Maria just won a year of CC.
Yeah, congratulations, Maria. Yeah. This is a great entry.
Yeah, it was really
you guys,
good.
Nice choice. So we have to go ahead and close things out, but sneak peek at what you're going to be working on tomorrow. I think you've already alluded a little bit to it.
We're going to be jumping into working on the heads-up display, the actual HUD for the game field, and then working on a couple additional screens for the skill and inventory kind of character gameplay aspect of it.
And in fact, we might even nail through inventory really quick.
Yeah.
Because I think we should spend most of the time on the HUD.
For sure.
And we'll show that. And there's only a couple things, maybe show how we get icons and some stuff like that. But we'll start off with inventory, and then the third day is going to be action-packed with a lot of HUD stuff.
Yeah. Action packed.
Action packed. I way oversold it. I'm sorry.
Back up. Can we erase that part?
This has been a pleasure working with you guys today and getting to see
Likewise.
what you work on. And tomorrow, I'll be back here tomorrow with you hosting again. I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Good first day.
Yeah, I feel like nothing exploded.
Yeah.
Everyone's living.
Everyone's living.
Except for Kevin.
Yeah, he's little Hellraiser.
Little Hellraiser.
Yeah. Excellent. Talon just got here, so he'll be up, I believe, next. Yep, Talon's up next. Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.